The morning had started like any other for Raymond. A quiet man in his early 40s, Raymond had been driving his black taxi through the city streets for nearly 2 decades. People came and went. Stories began and ended in the back seat of his cab. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind of morning where the air has just a bite of cold, and the sky carries the kind of gray that makes everything look still. Raymond sipped his lukewarm coffee, adjusted the mirror, and waited for his first ride of the day. But fate had a different plan. As he turned down an old alley near the outskirts of the neighborhood, a shortcut he'd taken hundreds of times, he noticed something unusual. A small figure was standing on the corner near the rundown bakery, alone. At first glance, it seemed like just another child waiting for someone. But something wasn't right. The child, a little boy, no older than 7, was shivering. His tiny hands were clenched into fists, and his eyes darted nervously from one side of the street to the other. He wore no coat, just a thin t-shirt and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. Raymond slowed down. "Hey there, champ," he called out, rolling down his window. "You lost." The boy blinked, lips trembling. Then he nodded slowly. Raymond parked, got out, and gently knelt beside him. "Where's your mom or dad?" The boy looked up with wide, frightened eyes. I don't know. I can't find them. I was with my aunt, and then I walked too far." Raymond didn't hesitate. He opened the back door. "Hop in. We'll figure this out together." Inside the cab, Raymond wrapped his jacket around the boy and handed him his half-empty cup of coffee. The boy held it like it was gold. "What's your name, little man?" Raymond asked gently. "Daniel," he whispered. "Daniel Cooper." Raymond tried to get more out of him. An address, phone number, even a landmark, but the child's memory was scattered. It was like trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. So, Raymond did the only thing that felt right. He drove from one block to the next. He searched for any sign of familiarity. He asked a few pedestrians, stopped by a nearby store, and even called the local police to report a lost child, just in case someone had filed a missing persons report. But no one knew anything. After nearly 2 hours of circling around, Raymond brought Daniel to the local precinct. The boy clung to his hand the entire time, and when it was time for him to be handed over to the officers, Daniel looked up at Raymond and whispered something that made the man's throat tighten. "Please don't leave me." Something stirred in Raymond that day. He had no children of his own. Life had thrown him more rejections than rewards. But in Daniel's eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Trust. Pure, fragile trust. And he couldn't walk away. He stayed with Daniel until child services arrived, gave his number, insisted that if no one claimed the boy soon, he'd be more than willing to help however he could. As he walked out of the station that afternoon, there was a strange heaviness in his chest. The image of Daniel's small hands holding that coffee cup, his voice trembling, stayed with him. He went home that night, tried to sleep, couldn't. Something was off, and he didn't know why. Raymond kept checking his phone, expecting a call from the station. Nothing. On the 4th day, it rang. "Mr. Raymond?" The voice on the other end said. "This is Officer Hughes. You brought a lost child, Daniel Cooper, a few days ago." "Yes," Raymond said, sitting up straight. "Is he all right?" There was a pause. "He's fine, but we need to talk. There's something you should know." Raymond's heart skipped. "What is it?" The officer's voice dropped. "You're not going to believe who that child is, or where he really came from." Raymond's grip tightened on the phone. The officer's words echoed in his ear like thunder. "You're not going to believe who that child is, or where he really came from." He stood frozen in the middle of his living room, the hum of the refrigerator the only background sound. His heart thudded louder than usual. "What do you mean?" he finally asked, trying to steady his voice. Officer Hughes paused, then said, "Please come to the station. It's better we talk in person." Raymond didn't wait. Within 30 minutes, he was at the precinct, seated across from Officer Hughes in a small private office. The walls were covered with case files and old bulletin boards. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something older, something unsaid. The officer folded his hands and looked directly into Raymond's eyes. "Daniel Cooper was not reported missing," he said calmly. Raymond's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" A child that age goes missing and no one files anything. That's what we thought too. But after some digging, we found something strange. There was a Daniel Cooper, but he went missing 3 years ago. Raymond blinked. 3 years. Yes, the officer nodded. But here's where it gets even stranger. That Daniel Cooper, he was presumed dead. Raymond's mind raced. He remembered the child's face vividly, the innocence, the fear, the cold in his voice when he said, "Please don't leave me." That wasn't the face of a ghost. That was real, human, present. But how? Raymond asked quietly. Where was he all this time? We don't know yet, the officer admitted. But Child Protective Services ran a DNA test, and it matched. He is Daniel Cooper. Raymond sat back, breath shallow. His parents, he asked. That's another story. Officer Hughes sighed. The father passed away in an accident 2 years ago. The mother, she's been in and out of rehab. She never came forward. The boy had been living with a relative, an aunt, but even she had no clue he was missing. Missing? From her own house. She assumed he ran away to play in the neighborhood, like he usually did. Thought he was with friends. But the system failed him, Raymond. Badly. Raymond felt a strange pressure behind his eyes. A heaviness he couldn't quite explain. Was it sorrow? Anger? Guilt? Maybe all of it. So what happens to him now? He asked after a moment. He's in a temporary care home until social services can decide what's next, the officer replied. Then, after a pause, added, he keeps asking for you. Those 4 words hit harder than expected. He does. The officer nodded. Said you made him feel safe. Said he wants to see you again. Raymond swallowed hard. The emotions caught in his throat. Can I? He asked. Can I see him? A few days later, the care facility was nothing like what Raymond had imagined. It was clean, quiet, filled with pastel-colored walls and the scent of fresh laundry. Children played in one corner, while soft music played from an old speaker. And there, sitting by the window with a small book in his lap, was Daniel. The moment he looked up and saw Raymond, he smiled. A big, warm, honest smile. Ray, he called out, rushing forward and wrapping his arms around the man's waist. Raymond knelt down and held him close. I missed you, the boy whispered. I missed you too, buddy. They sat together for almost an hour. Daniel talked more this time, about how he used to live with his aunt, about the day he got lost, about how scared he was until he saw Raymond's cab. Raymond listened patiently, nodding, laughing softly when the boy tried to imitate his deep voice or his taxi's squeaky brakes. Then came a question. Ray, the boy asked innocently, do you think I can live with you? Raymond froze. He looked into the boy's eyes, those same eyes that had once been filled with fear, now filled with hope. It wasn't a question of possibility. It was a question of heart. And in that moment, Raymond knew. He spoke to the social worker that same evening. She explained the process, the endless paperwork, the evaluations, the months of waiting. But Raymond didn't flinch. I'm not rich, he said, but I got enough to feed us both. I don't have a big house, but it's warm. And I may not be his blood, but I care for him like he's my own. The woman looked at him quietly for a moment, then smiled. That's more than enough. What Raymond didn't know, however, was that someone else had been watching. Someone who had been searching for Daniel all this time, and they were about to come forward with a truth that would change everything. Raymond had no idea what lay ahead. The idea of taking Daniel into his life had already filled him with an overwhelming sense of purpose. The boy had come into his world unexpectedly, but now he couldn't imagine life without him. But as his bond with Daniel grew stronger, the truth, the one he never anticipated, was lurking in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. It was a quiet afternoon when the phone call came. Raymond, the voice on the other end, was familiar. It was Officer Hughes again. I need you to come in. We've got more information about Daniel. The word sent a chill through Raymond's spine. He hadn't heard from the officer in days, and though things were going well with Daniel, there had been an undeniable tension, like something was about to shift. I'm on my way, Raymond said, his heart pounding as he hung up the phone. He arrived at the precinct a little after lunch, but this time, things felt different. The usual bustling energy of the place was subdued, and Officer Hughes met him with a solemn expression. Ray, this isn't easy. the officer began, motioning for Raymond to sit. "We've just uncovered something about Daniel's true identity." Raymond's blood ran cold. "I don't understand," he said, his voice unsteady. "What are you talking about?" Daniel was never meant to be raised by his aunt or his biological parents, for that matter. Officer Hughes explained, his voice thick with hesitation. "Daniel Cooper isn't. Daniel Cooper." Raymond's mind scrambled to process the officer's words. "What do you mean? Who is he then?" The officer leaned back, the weight of the truth seemingly bearing down on him. "Raymond, Daniel's real name, is Ethan Jameson." The name hit Raymond like a brick. His eyes widened in shock. "Ethan Jameson? That's not possible. I've seen his records. His birth certificate, his DNA." "I know." Officer Hughes interrupted, his voice tight with urgency. "But we verified it. Ethan was placed into the foster care system at the age of 2. His biological parents were involved in an underground child trafficking ring, and he was one of the children caught up in that mess. His real parents, have been keeping him hidden for years, moving him around in various foster homes, and eventually, well, you know the rest." Raymond could barely breathe. The entire world he thought he understood had just crumbled. "You're saying the boy I've been helping, he's not just lost, he's been part of something far worse?" Raymond's voice cracked, his mind spinning. "Yes, we've been able to piece it together," the officer confirmed. "And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Ethan's mother, she's not just a victim, Raymond. She's one of the perpetrators. She's been involved in orchestrating these adoptions, selling children to the highest bidder." Raymond felt his stomach drop. It was one thing to think he was helping a lost child, but this was something else entirely. As the officer continued to explain the details, Raymond struggled to reconcile the innocent boy he knew with the dark, tangled past he'd just learned about. "Are you telling me Ethan was kidnapped?" Raymond asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "That everything he's been through, it's all part of some scam?" "It's more complicated than that," Officer Hughes replied. "The system failed him. His biological parents, they've been involved in this for years, but it wasn't until recently that we started to connect the dots. Ethan was supposed to be placed in a new home under the radar, but when things went wrong and they lost track of him, that's when he ended up in your cab." Raymond's mind reeled. The boy's smile, the trust he'd shown, the connection they'd begun to build. Could it all just be a cruel twist of fate? "I don't know what to do," Raymond admitted quietly. "He's just a kid. He's so full of life, so full of hope. None of this makes sense." Later that evening, Raymond found himself standing outside the care facility again. Daniel, or Ethan, he reminded himself, was inside, probably wondering when Raymond would return. His mind was torn between the boy's gentle smile and the revelation of his past, a past filled with manipulation, secrecy, and pain. Raymond had always believed that when someone needed help, you gave it. That's what he did when he took Ethan into his cab that fateful day. But now, the stakes felt much higher. Was he truly helping this boy, or was he just another part of a much darker plan? As he stood there, thinking, he saw a familiar figure approach. It was the boy's aunt, the woman who had raised him before he was lost. Her face was drawn, tired, yet filled with determination. "Raymond," she said softly, "we need to talk." In the warmth of the dimly lit hallway of the care facility, Raymond and the aunt sat in an empty room, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. "I know this isn't what you expected," she said, her voice strained, "but you have to understand. Ethan, he was never supposed to be part of any of this. My sister, she's always been mixed up in these things. But Ethan, he's innocent." Raymond looked at her, torn. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The truth is overwhelming." "I know," she whispered, "but there's more. Ethan's mother, she wants him back. She's been in contact with the authorities. She's going to fight for him." Raymond's heart dropped. Ethan had already lost so much. The last thing he needed was to go back to a world of darkness, a world full of manipulation and danger. But it was beyond Raymond's control now. "I don't know what to do," Raymond said, his voice breaking. "Do what's right," she said simply. "If you believe in him, if you believe in who he can be, don't let him go." As Raymond walked away that night, the weight of the situation weighed heavy on his shoulders. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, giving a ride to a lost child, would lead him down this path. But now, there was no turning back. Raymond didn't know what would happen next, but he didn't know one thing. He had to stand by Ethan, no matter the truth or the cost. The world may have been full of secrets and shadows, but for Raymond, Ethan's future was the only truth that mattered now. Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been turned upside down in a matter of days. The whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and tension that had been building since the fateful day he met Ethan had come to a head. Now, the truth about Ethan's past was out in the open, and Raymond had a decision to make, one that would not only affect his future, but Ethan's as well. It was early morning when Raymond received the call from Officer Hughes. The officer's voice, once full of authority and resolve, now carried a sense of urgency that sent a chill through Raymond's body. "Raymond, it's time. We need to move quickly. Ethan's mother has filed for custody, and the judge is hearing her case today. If we don't act, she could get him back today. We can't let that happen." Raymond's mind raced. He had already made up his mind that he couldn't allow Ethan to return to the life he had once known, a life shrouded in secrecy and danger. But he had no legal standing to fight the authorities. What could he do against a mother determined to reclaim her son, no matter the cost? "Are you sure about this?" Raymond asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't have any doubts, Ray," Officer Hughes replied. "You've been a father figure to that boy since the moment you met him. You're the one who's shown him love, safety, and stability. He's going to need someone to stand for him today." The weight of those words landed heavily on Raymond's chest. He had never intended to be anyone's savior, but here he was, standing at the crossroads of a young boy's future. That afternoon, Raymond found himself seated in a courtroom, the air thick with tension. He could feel the eyes of the people around him, the other families, the social workers, even Ethan's biological mother, all on him, waiting to see what he would do next. Ethan's mother, a woman with sharp features and an air of arrogance, stood confidently at the front of the room, her lawyer by her side. She appeared to be prepared for this battle, as though she had been planning it for years. But Raymond knew the truth. He knew the kind of woman Ethan's mother truly was: manipulative, selfish, and capable of far worse. The judge, a stern-looking man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, cleared his throat before addressing the court. "We're here today to decide the custody of Ethan Jameson, a child whose past is tangled in a series of unfortunate events. But we must focus on his future, and who is best suited to provide for that future." Raymond's heart raced as the judge continued to speak. It felt like everything was moving in slow motion. The life of the boy he had come to love and care for was now in the hands of a courtroom full of strangers. Ethan's mother's lawyer stood up, making their case with eloquence. "Your Honor, my client is the child's biological mother. She has every right to reclaim her son. Despite the unfortunate circumstances of his early life, she is now in a position to care for him. She has a stable home and the resources to provide for him." Raymond felt his blood boil. Stable home? He knew better than anyone that the woman before the court had never been a mother to Ethan. She was a trafficker, a woman who cared only for herself and her twisted ambitions. Yet, the lawyer's words made him question everything he thought he knew. It was his turn to speak. Raymond stood, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your Honor, I'm not here to speak against a mother's love for her child. I am here because I believe that Ethan deserves a chance at a life free from fear and pain. I've seen the boy he is, and I know that he is worth fighting for." He paused, taking a breath, gathering his thoughts. Ethan's mother may have given birth to him, but I have given him a home. I've given him love. I've given him safety. And most importantly, I've shown him that there is something better than the darkness he's known his entire life. The room fell silent as Raymond's words hung in the air. The weight of his statement wasn't lost on anyone, especially Ethan's mother, whose face twisted with anger and disbelief. "I'm not asking for sympathy," Raymond continued, his voice unwavering. "I'm asking for what's best for Ethan. He has already been through more than any child should ever endure. If there's anyone here who has shown him what it means to be a family, it's me. I'll fight for him. I'll fight for his future." and I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe." Ethan's mother's lawyer stood to object, but the judge held up a hand, signaling for silence. The room was tense as the judge looked between Raymond and Ethan's mother. His expression was hard to read. "I've heard enough," the judge said finally. "The court will take a recess while we deliberate. We will reconvene shortly to make our decision." The gavel hit, and the room exploded into murmurs. Raymond sat back down, his heart pounding. There was nothing more to be done now but wait. The waiting felt like an eternity. Raymond spent those long minutes pacing in the hallway outside the courtroom, his mind unable to settle. He thought about Ethan, the way the boy had trusted him, the way he'd opened his heart despite everything that had happened. He thought about the night they'd spent together, just the two of them, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. How could Raymond just let that go? How could he let Ethan go back to the hands of someone who would only hurt him? When the courtroom doors finally opened, Raymond stood up immediately, his stomach twisting with nervous anticipation. The judge was back. The moment of truth had arrived. The heavy doors of the courtroom swung open, and Raymond's heart skipped a beat. The judge, a figure who had held so much power over their fates in the last few hours, walked into the room with an air of finality. Every eye was locked on him, the air thick with anticipation. Raymond stood up, trying to steady his breathing. He could feel the weight of his words still hanging in the air. But now it was time for the court to decide the next step in Ethan's life. Could he really save the boy from a fate that seemed almost inevitable? The judge cleared his throat as the room fell into a hushed silence. Raymond glanced over at Ethan's mother, who sat rigid in her seat, her eyes darting back and forth, seemingly calculating her next move. She hadn't spoken since Raymond's impassioned plea, but her icy stare was enough to make anyone second-guess their position. "The court has carefully considered the testimonies and the evidence presented," the judge began, his voice steady and unwavering. "We have taken into account the past circumstances." "The court has carefully considered the testimonies and the evidence presented," the judge began, his voice steady and unwavering. "We have taken into account the past circumstances surrounding young Ethan, as well as the current situation. And while it is clear that both parties have valid concerns, we must act in the best interest of the child." Raymond's breath hitched. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The judge paused for a moment, surveying the room. "I understand that this is not an easy decision for anyone involved. But after much consideration, I have come to a conclusion." Raymond's hands clenched at his sides, and he forced himself to focus. It was as if time had slowed down, and all he could hear was the beating of his own heart. His thoughts raced. Would he be enough for Ethan? Was this the right choice? The judge continued, "In this case, I have determined that young Ethan will remain in the custody of Raymond Walker. The evidence shows that he's been a stable and loving figure in the child's life, providing the care and protection that Ethan desperately needs." Raymond's chest tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. His mind tried to process the words, to make sense of the judge's decision. But before he could react, the judge raised a hand, signaling for him to remain calm. "This decision is not made lightly. It is based on the child's current well-being and the fact that Raymond Walker has, without question, been the one to provide the love, safety, and security that Ethan requires. I also acknowledge that the biological mother has faced challenges, but her past actions and her current inability to provide a stable environment for her son are of significant concern." The room was eerily quiet. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving, and Raymond could hardly breathe. He hadn't expected this outcome. He had prepared for a fight, for a struggle. But now, as the weight of the judge's words settled in, a sense of relief washed over him. Ethan's mother, who had been confident moments ago, now looked visibly shaken. Her mouth opened, as if to protest, but no words came out. She glanced around the room, her frustration growing with each passing second. Raymond could hardly take his eyes off her. He knew the truth now. Her threats and manipulations were not going to win her back Ethan. Not this time. And deep down, Raymond realized that he had won not just a battle, but an opportunity to change a boy's life forever. The judge continued, this time addressing the room as a whole. However, this ruling is not final. There will be regular review hearings to ensure that Ethan remains in a safe environment, and any new information regarding his welfare will be taken into account. It is crucial that Raymond Walker continues to prove himself as a responsible guardian. Raymond nodded, barely able to form words as the judge's gavel slammed down, signaling the finalization of the decision. You may go, but remember, the road ahead won't be easy. We expect full cooperation for the welfare of the child. Dismissed. As the room began to stir and people began to stand, Raymond felt a sense of both accomplishment and apprehension. He had won this fight, but the battle wasn't over. Ethan's life was still in turmoil, and there were challenges ahead. But in that moment, he felt the weight of his responsibility more than ever. The air outside the courthouse felt different. The sun shone brighter, as though the universe itself was acknowledging the shift in fate. Raymond walked down the steps, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks, but there was still a gnawing feeling deep within him. The battle for Ethan's future wasn't over, but it had taken a significant turn. As Raymond climbed into his car, he let out a long breath. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a text message from Officer Hughes. You did it. Ethan's safe now. But be ready. There's more work to be done. Raymond smiled faintly. It was true. The road ahead would be long, but at least for now, Ethan had a chance. And Raymond was determined to be the man who would make sure that the boy never had to face the darkness again. At that moment, Raymond's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ethan. Raymond, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen now. Raymond's heart dropped, and his fingers quickly typed a response. He knew that this moment was as crucial as any. He needed to reassure Ethan, to let him know that everything would be okay. You're not alone, Ethan. I'm here. Always. As Raymond read the message, a deep sense of purpose flooded his soul. There was no turning back now. He had fought for Ethan's safety, for his future. And as he stared out the windshield, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with unwavering determination. For Ethan, days passed in a blur of routine for Raymond, but the air of uncertainty remained. Despite the judge's decision in his favor, there was still a nagging feeling deep within him. Ethan was safe for now, but the weight of his responsibility felt heavier than ever. Raymond knew that his fight wasn't over. There was more at play here than just the custody battle. It wasn't until a quiet Thursday afternoon that Raymond's world was turned upside down once again. He had just finished a shift when his phone buzzed, a message from Officer Hughes lighting up the screen. Raymond had grown accustomed to the officer's texts, but this one felt different, more urgent. He quickly opened the message. Raymond, we need to talk. I've got some information that could change everything. Meet me at the usual spot in 30 minutes. Raymond's pulse quickened. He didn't hesitate. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to be a casual conversation. The usual spot was a quiet, dimly lit diner on the outskirts of town. Raymond arrived early, his thoughts racing as he parked the car. Was this about Ethan's mother? Or something even more sinister? As he walked through the door, the familiar hum of conversations and clinking silverware did little to calm his nerves. He spotted Officer Hughes sitting in a corner booth, a cup of coffee in front of him. The officer looked up as Raymond approached, his expression tense. Sit down, Raymond, Hughes said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the room to make sure no one was listening. This isn't something I expected to find. Raymond slid into the seat across from him, his curiosity piqued. What's going on? What have you found? Hughes leaned forward, lowering his voice even more. I went back and reviewed some of the background on Ethan's mother. What I uncovered is, well, it's disturbing. Raymond's stomach churned. He had already known that Ethan's mother had her issues, but there was something in Hughes's tone that made him feel uneasy. She's not just a troubled individual, Hughes continued, his eyes darkening. She's been involved in something much deeper, something I don't think anyone realized. Raymond furrowed his brow, struggling to keep up. What do you mean? What exactly are we talking about? Hughes hesitated for a moment, then slid a folder across the table. Raymond opened it, his eyes scanning the documents inside. The first thing that struck him was the photo of a man, someone Raymond didn't recognize, standing next to Ethan's mother. The man's face was shadowed, but there was no mistaking the look of familiarity between them. "This is Marcus Bennett," Hughes said quietly. "He's been tied to some pretty unsavory groups. People who deal with, let's just say, things we don't want to know about. I couldn't find anything solid at first, but now that I've connected the dots, it all makes sense." Raymond stared at the photo in disbelief. She's involved with him? But why would she keep that a secret? And how does this involve Ethan? Hughes's face was grim. Ethan's mother has been using him as leverage. That's why she was so desperate to regain custody. She knows that Marcus has connections, and she was willing to do anything to get Ethan back under her control. Raymond felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The man in the photo, Marcus Bennett, didn't look like someone who was capable of caring for a child. But it wasn't just about Ethan's mother anymore. It was about something much darker, something that could put both Ethan and Raymond in danger. The minutes passed in tense silence as Raymond tried to process the information. His mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant for Ethan's future. Was it possible that Ethan's mother had been using him as a pawn? Raymond's hands shook as he set the photo back down on the table. "How do you know all of this? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Hughes sighed, his eyes clouded with regret. "I didn't have enough to go on at first. But I've been digging, Raymond, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized that this isn't just about a custody battle. This is about a larger network, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." Raymond's mind raced. He thought back to everything that had happened. The mysterious phone calls from Ethan's mother, the threats, the strange behavior. It was all starting to make sense now. But the truth was more terrifying than he could have imagined. "I have to protect Ethan," Raymond said, his voice unwavering. "No matter what it takes." Hughes nodded gravely. "That's why I'm telling you this now. You're not just fighting for custody anymore, Raymond. You're fighting to keep Ethan out of something much darker than either of you could have imagined. And trust me, it's only going to get worse from here." Raymond left the diner with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions. As he drove home, his thoughts swirled with images of Ethan, of his innocent face, and of the life that he deserved to have. He couldn't let this world of darkness and deceit swallow the boy whole. He couldn't let Ethan become a pawn in a game he didn't even understand. Raymond knew what he had to do. He had to protect Ethan at all costs. No more hesitation. No more doubts. The truth had been revealed, and the fight for Ethan's future had just entered a whole new chapter. Raymond's determination burned brighter than ever as he left the diner. The weight of the revelation about Marcus Bennett and Ethan's mother weighed heavily on his mind. But now, more than ever, he knew he had no choice but to fight for Ethan's safety. It wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about a child's future and the darkness that loomed over it. As he pulled into his driveway, Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The truth had surfaced, and it was far more dangerous than he could have imagined. He had no illusions about the road ahead. It would be filled with obstacles and dangers, but he was ready to face them all. Inside the house, Raymond found himself pacing back and forth, his mind racing with thoughts. He knew he needed help, but from where? Who could he trust to stand by him through this? And more importantly, who would help protect Ethan from the twisted world his mother and Marcus Bennett were a part of? It was then that a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Startled, Raymond quickly crossed the room and opened the door to find his best friend, Jack, standing there with a concerned expression. "Hey, man," Jack said, his tone a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You all right? I could tell something was off when you left the diner earlier." Raymond didn't waste any time. He pulled Jack into the living room and closed the door behind them. "Jack, I need to talk to you about something serious." Jack sat down, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Raymond took a deep breath and began recounting everything he'd learned from Officer Hughes, from the custody battle to the dark ties between Ethan's mother and Marcus Bennett. Jack listened carefully, his expression growing more troubled with every word. "So, wait a minute," Jack said once Raymond had finished explaining. "Ethan's mom is involved with this Marcus guy, and they're using him for leverage? That's insane. But I get why you're so shaken up. This isn't just about custody anymore. It's about keeping Ethan safe from a world he doesn't even know exists." Raymond nodded. "Exactly. I can't do this alone, Jack. I need your help." I need someone I can trust to be by my side in this fight. Jack looked at Raymond for a long moment, his expression softening. You've always had my back, man. Of course I'm with you. But we need to be smart about this. You can't just go charging in without a plan. Raymond felt a small sense of relief. At least now, he didn't feel entirely alone in this. But Jack was right. They had to be strategic. We'll need more than just us. We need to involve the right people. People who can help us fight back, protect Ethan, and get the authorities on our side. I can't let him fall into that world. I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe, Raymond said, his voice steady with conviction. Jack nodded firmly. I'll start looking into Marcus Bennett's connections. We need to understand who we're up against before we make a move. We'll gather information, but we need to stay ahead of them. We can't afford to be reactive. If we want to protect Ethan, we have to be proactive. Raymond felt a surge of gratitude for his friend. Thanks, Jack. I don't know what I'd do without you. Jack gave him a reassuring smile. We got this, Raymond. We're not letting anything happen to Ethan. You just focus on him, and we'll handle the rest. The days that followed were a whirlwind of action. Raymond and Jack worked tirelessly to gather more information about Marcus Bennett and his associates. Jack's connections proved invaluable, and soon they were able to track down some key players who were linked to Bennett's underground dealings. They reached out to a few trusted allies who could help them uncover the full scope of the operation, a network of individuals who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Meanwhile, Raymond took every opportunity to spend time with Ethan, trying to give him a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. They went on walks together, played video games, and even had impromptu movie nights. Raymond cherished these moments more than ever, knowing how much danger Ethan could potentially face if they didn't succeed in their mission. Every night, as Raymond tucked Ethan in a bed, he couldn't help but wonder if this would be the last time he'd have the chance to protect him. But he refused to let fear take root. He had a mission now, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. One evening, after a long day of planning, Raymond received an unexpected call. It was from Officer Hughes. Raymond, you need to listen to me carefully, Hughes said, his voice tense. I've got some news. Marcus Bennett has gotten wind of what's been happening. He's moving fast, and it looks like he's planning something big. I don't know how much time we have left before he makes his move. Raymond's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What's he planning? I don't know all the details yet, but we're going to need to act quickly, Hughes replied. Meet me tomorrow at the same spot. I'll have more information, but we need to be ready for anything. Raymond's thoughts raced as he hung up the phone. Marcus Bennett was making a move, and it was only a matter of time before things escalated further. As Raymond prepared for what was to come, he realized that his fight wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about standing up to the darkness, about protecting the ones he loved from a world that would never stop until it had what it wanted. He wasn't just fighting for a boy's future. He was fighting for the future of everyone who had ever been touched by that same darkness. But Raymond was ready, and with Jack by his side, they would fight together no matter what it took. The morning came too soon. Raymond barely slept, his mind consumed by the urgency of what lay ahead. He had a sense of foreboding, a deep knowing that this was it, the moment where everything would either come crashing down or be set right. He had no illusions about the risks, but he wasn't backing down. Not now, not when Ethan was counting on him. Raymond met Officer Hughes in the quiet parking lot, the air thick with tension. The officer's usual calm demeanor was replaced by a sharp, nervous edge. You're right on time, Hughes said, glancing around nervously. We don't have much time. Marcus is making his move today. Raymond's pulse quickened. What's the plan? What do we know? Hughes handed him a file, the papers inside revealing disturbing information about Marcus Bennett's operations. His criminal network was vast, reaching far beyond what Raymond had initially believed. The connections ran deep, and the people involved would stop at nothing to protect their empire. Raymond's stomach twisted as he realized just how dangerous this fight had become. Bennett's plan is to use Ethan as leverage. He knows that if he has the boy, he can control you. He'll try to bring you to your knees, Hughes explained. We need to act fast, Raymond. We can't wait any longer. I've got a team ready to raid his operations, but we need to get to Ethan first. If we don't, Bennett will. Raymond's eyes darkened with resolve. I won't let him take Ethan. Not without a fight. Hughes nodded, his face hardening. Then we're going in together. It's now or never. The tension was palpable as Raymond and Hughes drove to Marcus Bennett's estate, a sprawling mansion nestled on the outskirts of the city. Raymond's mind raced as they approached. This was it, the final confrontation, the moment that would decide Ethan's fate. He could feel the weight of the boy's safety on his shoulders, and it was almost unbearable. When they arrived, Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Every step forward felt like a countdown. The mansion loomed ahead like a dark, imposing fortress, its windows blacked out. It was as if the entire place was waiting for the right moment to strike. Hughes signaled for the team to move into position. Raymond took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He glanced over at Hughes, who gave him a firm nod. It was now or never. As they moved through the estate's grounds, Raymond's heart pounded in his chest. Every shadow seemed to whisper danger. Every creak of the old wooden floors sounded like a warning. They reached the back door of the mansion, and Raymond's hand tightened around the handle. This was it. He was about to face Marcus Bennett head-on. Inside the mansion, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus Bennett was waiting for them, and Raymond wasn't sure if he was ready for what was about to happen. They entered the main room, and there, standing in front of them, was Marcus. He looked every bit the part of the criminal mastermind Raymond had feared. Tall, imposing, with cold eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. A man who was used to controlling everything and everyone around him. "You should have stayed out of this, Raymond," Marcus said, his voice smooth like silk but laced with malice. "This isn't your fight. It never was." Raymond didn't flinch. "It became my fight the moment you tried to take Ethan." Marcus chuckled darkly. "Ethan? That boy is nothing but a pawn. He always has been. You think you can save him from me? From his world? You don't have the power to stop what's coming." The words stung, but Raymond held his ground. "You're wrong. I'm not going to let you use him. I'll burn everything to the ground before I let you take him." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, and suddenly, Ethan appeared, standing frozen in the doorway. His eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion. "Ethan," Raymond called, rushing toward him. But Marcus was faster. He stepped in front of the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder in a possessive manner. "Stay back, Raymond," he sneered. "This is between me and you. If you want him, you'll have to go through me." Raymond's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment, the one he had feared but knew would come. He couldn't back down. Not now. Just as Raymond took a step forward, there was a loud crash. The SWAT team, led by Officer Hughes, burst through the front door, weapons drawn. The confrontation that had been brewing finally exploded into action. In the chaos that followed, Marcus tried to make a break for it, but Hughes and his team were ready. A tense standoff unfolded, with guns drawn, each second stretching into eternity. Raymond's focus never left Ethan, his eyes locked on the boy who stood just feet away, trembling with fear. "Ethan," Raymond whispered urgently, his voice cracking. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm here. Everything's going to be okay." The moment the words left his mouth, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The tense, violent energy seemed to dissipate as Marcus was subdued by the team, his cold demeanor replaced by frantic desperation. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Raymond was finally able to cross the room and pull Ethan into his arms, holding him tightly. The boy clung to him, his body shaking with the weight of everything that had happened. "Are you okay?" Raymond whispered, brushing a lock of hair from Ethan's face. Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I was so scared, Dad. I didn't know what was going to happen." Raymond's heart broke at the sight of the boy in his arms, but he didn't let go. "I know, buddy. I know. But you're safe now. We're going to start over. Together." As the SWAT team took Marcus into custody, Raymond held Ethan tightly, never letting go. He knew the battle was far from over, but in this moment, he could finally breathe. They had won. Against all odds, they had come out on top. And as he looked at the boy in his arms, Raymond knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened next, he would always fight for Ethan. Always. The days that followed the dramatic rescue were a whirlwind. Raymond could barely keep up with the flood of news reports, police statements, and questions from the media. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from friends, family, and reporters, all seeking answers. Yet through it all, there was only one thing on his mind: Ethan. The boy was adjusting to the new reality, his innocence shattered, but still intact in the most profound way. It wasn't easy for him, but Raymond was determined to make sure that Ethan's world would be rebuilt, piece by piece. There was no more room for secrets, no more room for the shadows that had loomed over them for so long. It was time to heal, time to start fresh. Raymond sat at the kitchen table, looking at the small stack of paperwork before him. Among the various documents, one stood out: a letter from court. It was official now. Marcus Bennett was going away for a long time. The weight of that knowledge gave Raymond a strange sense of relief. The nightmare was over. Yet there was still so much to process. The magnitude of what had happened still felt surreal. A man with such power and influence had been brought down by a single act of kindness, a simple gesture of helping a lost child. It was almost too poetic to believe. But Raymond knew the truth. The world didn't work that way. Sometimes justice had to be fought for, and sometimes it had to come from the most unexpected places. As Raymond sat lost in thought, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. Ethan entered the room, his small frame looking even more fragile after the ordeal they had been through. The boy's eyes were still haunted by the memories of the past weeks, but Raymond saw something else there too, a glimmer of hope. "Dad!" Ethan's voice was quiet, hesitant. It still felt strange for the boy to call him that, but Raymond had long since stopped correcting him. It was a sign of trust, and that was more precious than anything. Raymond looked up from the papers, his heart swelling with love. "Hey, buddy, you doing okay?" Ethan nodded slowly, walking over to sit beside him at the table. I'm trying to be okay." Raymond reached over and gently placed a hand on Ethan's, giving him a reassuring squeeze. "It's all right to be scared, Ethan. But remember, you don't have to face this alone. You've got me." The boy smiled faintly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." Raymond's throat tightened at the words. He hadn't realized just how much he'd come to care for this child, how much he'd come to see him as his own. In his heart, Ethan was already his son, and he would protect him no matter what. As the days passed, Raymond continued to keep a low profile, focusing on Ethan and their new life. The media frenzy had died down somewhat, but there were still moments of tension, moments when Raymond could feel the eyes of the world on him. He wasn't naive. He knew that Marcus's reach had been far and wide. There would still be people who would want to take advantage of the situation, who would try to make life difficult for him and Ethan. But Raymond wasn't afraid anymore. With Ethan by his side, he had everything he needed to face whatever came next. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Raymond felt ready to face them. He knew that whatever the future held, he and Ethan would face it together. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. One afternoon, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Raymond found himself sitting on the porch, gazing out at the horizon. Ethan was inside, playing with some of the new toys they'd gotten him. Simple things, but things that brought a sense of normalcy back to their lives. Raymond allowed himself a moment of peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of the world didn't seem so heavy. It wasn't gone entirely, but it was manageable now. He wasn't alone, and Ethan wasn't alone either. The sound of a car pulling up in the driveway broke him from his thoughts. He turned to see a familiar face stepping out of the vehicle. Officer Hughes. "Raymond," Hughes called as he approached the porch, offering a friendly wave. "Hey, Hughes," Raymond replied, standing up to greet him. "What's going on?" Hughes grinned, holding out his hand. "I just wanted to check in. We got the final word. Marcus is behind bars for good. There's no coming back from this one." Raymond shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. "That's good news. Really good." "It is," Hughes agreed. "But I want to tell you something else. You made a real impact, Raymond. Not just by taking down a dangerous criminal, but by showing people that even in the darkest times, there's always a way out. You did something many wouldn't have the courage to do. Raymond didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't looking for praise. He'd done what needed to be done, nothing more. But it felt good to know that others saw what he had done as something meaningful. I was just doing what was right, Raymond said simply. That's all. Hughes nodded. Well, you did more than that. You saved a life. And in this job, that means everything. Raymond didn't have the words to respond. Instead, he just smiled. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need anything except to know that he'd done right by Ethan. That was all that mattered. As the night fell and Raymond stood beside Ethan, watching him settle in a bed, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led them to this point. The world had tried to break them. It had come close. But they had survived. They had found their way back to each other, stronger than before. Raymond kissed Ethan's forehead and whispered softly, "Good night, buddy. Sleep well. Tomorrow is a new day." And with that, the door gently closed behind him. As Raymond turned off the lights and headed to his own room, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The storm had passed, and now a new chapter could begin. The days that followed were quieter, more peaceful, as if the universe itself had taken a breath, allowing Raymond and Ethan to regain their footing. The tension from the past few weeks had subsided, and their lives, though still marked by the echoes of what had happened, were starting to feel more like normal. For Raymond, it wasn't about forgetting what had occurred. He knew the scars would remain, both his own and Ethan's. But there was a certain power in moving forward, in turning the page to a new chapter. And for both of them, this was a new beginning. They had each other, and that was more than enough. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Raymond received a call that would change everything again. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, but something about the moment told him it was important. With a steady hand, he answered. "Hello, Raymond, it's Officer Hughes," came the familiar voice, now sounding more serious than usual. "I've got something I need to share with you. I thought you'd want to know." Raymond's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "There's a development. A significant one. It seems that there's more to Marcus Bennett's empire than we initially realized. You weren't the only person he was controlling. It's a much larger network than we thought." Raymond's pulse quickened. "What does this mean? Is Ethan in danger?" Hughes was quick to reassure him. "No, Ethan is safe. But what I'm telling you is important. There are others, people in power, who have been hiding in the shadows. Marcus wasn't just a criminal mastermind. He was a part of something much bigger. And now, with him behind bars, those people are starting to surface. They're watching you." Raymond felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What do we do about it?" "We do what we've been doing all along," Hughes said, his voice firm with conviction. "We keep moving forward. We stay vigilant. But this time, we'll have the law behind us." Raymond let out a slow breath, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you, Hughes. I'll be careful." The call ended, and Raymond sat in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. There were still shadows lurking in the corners, shadows that would never fully disappear. But as he looked over at Ethan, who was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring a picture, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had already faced the darkness together, and they had emerged victorious. This would not change that. Later that evening, as Raymond and Ethan sat down for dinner, the quiet peace that had settled over their home seemed almost surreal. They were surrounded by simple things: a warm meal, soft lighting, and the comforting hum of their everyday routine. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they had been through, but it was exactly what they both needed. Ethan looked up from his plate, his small voice breaking the silence. "Dad, I was thinking—" Raymond glanced up, his heart softening at the boy's thoughtful expression. "What's on your mind, buddy?" "I'm glad you're my dad," Ethan said quietly. The words were simple, but they held so much weight. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't helped me that day." Raymond felt a lump form in his throat. He reached across the table and gently took Ethan's hand. "I'm glad you're my son, Ethan. I'll always protect you, no matter what." The boy smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I know, and I'm not scared anymore." For the first time in weeks, Raymond believed him. It wasn't just the words. It was the way Ethan said them, with a quiet confidence that Raymond hadn't seen in him before. They were both healing piece by piece, and the future was beginning to look a little brighter. The next morning, Raymond took Ethan out for a walk in the park. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. As they strolled down the path, Raymond's thoughts wandered back to the day they had met. The day he had helped a lost child, not knowing that his life, and the boy's life, would be changed forever. He hadn't been looking for heroism. He hadn't been looking for recognition. He had just been doing what any decent person would do. But what he had discovered through this entire ordeal was something far more precious. The power of love, of family, and the unbreakable bond that had formed between him and Ethan. As they reached the end of the path, Ethan stopped and pointed at something in the distance. A small group of children were playing near the swings, laughing and chasing each other. "Can I go play with them, Dad?" Ethan asked, his eyes full of excitement. Raymond smiled, a warmth flooding his chest. "Of course. Go ahead, buddy." Ethan ran off, joining the group with a carefree enthusiasm that Raymond hadn't seen in a long time. Watching him, Raymond felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Ethan had come so far, and Raymond had been there every step of the way. For the first time, Raymond allowed himself to fully relax. Everything had fallen into place, and he had found peace in the most unexpected of. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, Raymond stood alone for a moment, taking it all in. The challenges had been many, the darkness overwhelming at times. But through it all, he had never lost sight of what truly mattered. The love he had for Ethan and the unshakable belief that they could face anything together. They had come full circle, and no matter what the future held, Raymond knew one thing for sure. He and Ethan would always find their way back to each other, no matter how far they had to go.